They say home is where the heart is. But for Elena, home had become a place where her heart broke quietly over and over again. She stood in the kitchen like she always did, apron tied neatly, hands smelling faintly of lemon and dish soap, the sound of clinking glasses and laughter floating in from the dining room. Her son, Andrew, and his wife, Melissa, were hosting friends again. Elena had cooked the meal, of course. She always did. She'd spent the entire day preparing it, herbed chicken, roasted vegetables, warm bread baked from scratch. The kind of meal you make when love still lingers. But no one saved her a seat. She wasn't invited to the table. Not anymore. Instead, she stood in the shadows, wiping the counter clean, pretending not to hear the stories, the jokes, the casual mentions of plans and dreams she had no place in. Her son, her only child, didn't even glance her way. Years ago, Elena had opened her doors to Andrew and Melissa when they hit a rough patch. "Just until you get back on your feet," she had said with a soft smile, her heart full of hope. Back then, she believed family meant something more than shared blood. It meant loyalty, care, respect. But things changed. They took over her house. Little by little, her memories were packed into boxes. Melissa repainted the walls Elena had spent years picking colors for. Furniture disappeared, replaced with cold, modern pieces Elena never would have chosen. Her handmade quilts vanished into the garage. The scent of her life, her legacy, slowly erased. And still she stayed quiet. She told herself it was temporary. She told herself she was doing the right thing, that mothers were supposed to give until they had nothing left. But what happens when no one sees what you give? When your presence becomes invisible? Every morning, Elena would wake before the sun, start the coffee, prepare breakfast. She moved like a ghost through her own home, cleaning, folding, fixing. She didn't expect thanks, she didn't even expect kindness anymore. But sometimes she wondered what it would feel like to be acknowledged, to hear her name spoken with warmth, to be asked, "How are you?" It never came. Melissa barely made eye contact. Andrew stayed locked in his office, busy with what he called high-priority projects. And Elena stayed where they expected her to stay, behind the scenes. But one morning, something changed. It was a Tuesday. The sun had just started to rise, casting soft orange light through the window. Elena was at the stove, frying eggs just like always. Melissa breezed in, phone pressed to her ear, voice chirping about manifesting abundance. Without a glance, she reached over Elena's shoulder, grabbed a glass, filled it with almond milk, and walked out. No good morning, no thank you. Just silence. Elena stood frozen, spatula in hand, eggs sizzling behind her. And suddenly it hit her not like a thunderclap, but a cold, quiet wave. She was no longer the heart of this home. She was its help. Her chest tightened, not with anger, not even sadness, just a final, devastating clarity. She didn't belong here anymore. She turned off the stove, left the eggs unfinished. Sat at the kitchen table, staring out the window at the garden she once tended so carefully. The flowers that bloomed each spring because she believed in nurturing life, even when it didn't thank her for it. That evening, she packed a small suitcase. A few clothes, her favorite photo of Andrew as a child, her toothbrush. No goodbyes. She walked out the front door of the house she had built with her bare hands, where every wall whispered stories of sacrifice and love. She walked away not in bitterness but in silence. No one noticed she was gone, not at first. The motel room smelled like bleach. The bedspread was scratchy. The television droned in the background, playing some late-night infomercial. She stared at her phone, expecting, hoping for a message, a missed call, a sign that someone cared. Nothing. And in that quiet, Alina finally saw the truth. She had become disposable in the lives of those she had given everything to. The realization didn't crush her, it cleared something. The fog of years spent swallowing her voice lifted. And underneath it was a woman who had bent for too long, who had loved too much without asking for anything in return. Now she would ask for nothing. She would take back what was hers. The house was still in her name. She had never signed it over, though Melissa had tried to nudge her in that direction once. Just for tax reasons, she had said. Alina had smiled and nodded, but she hadn't signed. And now that small act of caution was the key to her freedom. She didn't need revenge, she needed respect. And if they couldn't give it, they could give her distance. As she sat in the dim motel light, a quiet determination bloomed inside her. She wasn't gone, she was just getting started. Long before the silence and the neglect, there was laughter. Alina remembered it vividly, not as nostalgia, but as evidence. Evidence that she had lived a life filled with meaning, that her heart had once been full of purpose. Her memories weren't fragments. They were vivid scenes stitched together by love, sacrifice, and tireless devotion. She remembered the day she brought Andrew home from the hospital, a tiny bundle wrapped in a borrowed blue blanket. The walls of their modest apartment hadn't been painted yet, the crib was secondhand, but her heart had never felt richer. She sat on the floor that night, watching him breathe, promising herself, "You'll never feel like you don't belong. Not in this world, not with me." And for years she kept that promise. When Andrew's father left, too tired, too overwhelmed, too selfish, Alina didn't waver. She picked up an extra job, then another. She cleaned houses during the day and worked the night shift at a bakery. She never told Andrew how tight money was, how exhausted she felt. She just showed up, every day, every night. When Andrew had a fever, she stayed up beside his bed, cold cloth in hand, whispering lullabies between prayers. When he needed school supplies, she skipped meals to save. When he dreamed of going to college, she filled out the forms herself, determined that nothing, not even the weight of the world, would keep her son from flying. And he did fly. He graduated with honors, landed a good job. Met Melissa at a networking event. She was bright, stylish, ambitious. Alina tried to love her, she really did. She welcomed her in, hosted dinners, handed down heirloom recipes. She didn't complain when Melissa rearranged the house or when she mocked Alina's old floral wallpaper. She let it go, for peace, for family. But peace, Alina learned, was a currency too many were willing to steal from the ones who valued it most. As she sat in that worn motel chair, the past came flooding back, not just the sacrifices but the quiet joys. The birthdays where Andrew blew out candles with cheeks puffed and eyes wide. The time he ran through the backyard with a kite trailing behind him, shouting, "Look, Mom, I'm flying." He was flying, but somewhere along the way he forgot who held the string. Alina never wanted repayment. She never expected him to carry the weight she had borne. But what she had hoped for, silently, achingly, was gratitude. Not the grand, showy kind, just the small moments. A cup of tea brought to her in the evening. A shared laugh at the dinner table. A whispered, "Thanks, Mom." But there had been none of that. Instead, she became an accessory to their curated life. The woman who kept the house running while Melissa vlogged about self-care. The hands that folded laundry while Andrew posted about grind culture and building empires. Alina had cleaned their bathroom tiles on her knees while they scrolled through vacation packages. And still, she stayed silent. Because that's what love had always looked like to her, quiet, consistent, and invisible. But silence is not the same as peace. Now the motel clock ticked loudly. Eleanor stared at the ceiling, wondering how it had all slipped so far away. Had she loved too much, given too easily, or had she simply never taught them to see her? Her phone buzzed. A message from Andrew. "Hey Mom, are you okay? Haven't seen you around." The words felt like a placeholder. A text sent not from worry but from obligation. There was no, "We miss you," no, "Please come home." Just a casual, detached check-in like she'd gone out for groceries and was taking too long. She didn't reply. Instead, she opened a notebook, the same kind she used to buy for Andrew every September, the kind she used to write notes in, slipping them into his lunchbox. "You've got this. Love, Mom." Now she wrote something else, dates, bank statements, the property deed. She opened her laptop, logged into county records, and stared at the digital confirmation that her house, was still legally hers. Every wall, every floorboard, every doorknob, hers. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't even about the house. It was about the truth that she had mattered, that her labor, her love, her life had weight. And if Andrew and Melissa couldn't see that, if they continued to treat her like a background character in their story, then they would feel her absence as a shift in their universe. The next message came from Melissa. "Hey Cheryl, not sure if you're feeling okay, but we could use your help around the house. Things are a little crazy right now. Let us know when you're coming back." She read it 3 times, "Your help." Like she was staff on leave, expected to report back to duty. She laughed, not a joyful laugh, but the kind that sounded like the cracking of old porcelain. Sharp, bitter, final. She didn't answer. The silence stretched. In that silence, Eleanor found her voice. They had built their comfort on her back. Now they would learn what life was like without that foundation. Not out of cruelty, not out of revenge, but because she had remembered something they forgot. She was never theirs to use, she was her own. The motel's thin walls did little to keep out the noise of the world, but inside, Eleanor was cocooned in her own stillness. It wasn't peaceful, not yet, but it was hers. She had lived her life in service of others. Now, for the first time, she was listening to herself. She brewed weak coffee in the tiny motel pot, poured it into a paper cup, and sat at the wobbly desk with her notebook. The same notebook where she had written the first lines of her plan, a plan not for revenge but for recovery. Eleanor hadn't disappeared. She had stepped out of the role they cast her in, and she wasn't stepping back. She began listing everything she had paid for since Andrew and Melissa moved in. The groceries, the utilities, the upgrades Melissa insisted on, the new dishwasher, the smart thermostat, all charged to Eleanor's accounts. She had even paid for Melissa's business cards for that coaching service that never really coached anyone. She had funded a lifestyle where she was never invited to live. And then the calls started coming. First, Andrew, a voicemail. Casual, "Hey Mom, just wondering where you are. Melissa's kind of stressed. Give us a call when you can." Then Melissa, more urgent, "Cheryl, we really need you back. The house is a mess. Brian's buried in work and I can't do everything alone. Just let us know what's going on. You can't just leave like this." Eleanor let the phone ring. Each message revealed more than the one before, not regret, not sorrow. Just discomfort, inconvenience. The house didn't run without her, and they were finally beginning to feel that absence, not emotionally but logistically. They missed the maid, not the mother. She walked to the local library that afternoon, found a quiet table with an outlet, and opened her old laptop. Her hands didn't tremble, they moved with purpose. She pulled up the county records again, her name still on the deed. She called a lawyer. The woman on the other end of the line spoke in calm, measured tones, asked the right questions, offered clear answers. "Are you ready to sell the property, Miss Lane?" "Yes," Alina said, no hesitation, it was done. The official notice was sent, certified mail, 30 days to vacate, no exceptions. Alina didn't feel triumphant. She felt grounded, solid, like a woman reclaiming her own name after years of being referred to only by her function. That evening, the phone lit up again, 3 missed calls, 2 voicemails, a text. "What are you doing?" "Ashley is losing it." "We can't lose the house." "Not once we're sorry, not once we were wrong, just panic." Just the collapse of a structure they had assumed was indestructible. But Alina wasn't their structure anymore. She sat back, stared at the ceiling of her temporary refuge and breathed. Not heavily, not shakily, but freely. The air tasted different when it wasn't laced with obligation. Days passed. Then a knock at her motel door, 3 soft taps. Andrew, she didn't answer at first. She watched him through the peephole, rumpled jacket, eyes tired, shoulders slumped in a way that said defeat more than concern. She opened the door, but only with the chain on. "Mom, what are you doing?" he asked, his voice cracked. Alina said nothing. "Melissa's freaking out. We didn't know where you went. You could have at least told us." She didn't flinch. "I'm not your maid, Andrew." He blinked, the words struck him like a cold wind. "Look, I get it, you're upset, but you can't just walk away from family." That word again, family, a word they used only when they needed her. A word that should have meant safety, warmth, home, but for Alina it had become a label that excused everything they took and nothing they gave. "I didn't walk away from family," she said softly. "I walked away from people who stopped seeing me." Andrew tried to respond, nothing came out. She closed the door gently, no anger, just truth. The next messages came quickly, frantic, accusing, desperate. "This is childish, Mom. You're hurting the people who love you. You're not thinking straight." But Alina had never thought more clearly. She wasn't the one who forgot birthdays, who stepped over laundry, who laughed while another person ate cold food alone in the kitchen. They had built a home out of her generosity. Now it was crumbling under the weight of their ingratitude, and she wasn't coming back to hold it up. The foundation was hers. The house was hers, and soon it would be gone. The 30-day clock had begun ticking. Back at the house, Andrew and Melissa moved through rooms filled with comfort they no longer had the right to claim. The kitchen, once filled with sense of Alina's quiet love, now smelled like stress. The laundry was undone. The dishwasher unused. Melissa burned a pan trying to make grilled cheese. There was no warm dinner waiting, no fresh towels folded. No unseen hands restoring order while others rested. For the first time, they saw the life they thought they built as it really was, scaffolding balanced entirely on Alina's shoulders. And now she was gone. Melissa's calls became less polite. Andrew's voicemails grew shorter. The edge in their voices sharpened, not from grief but from fear. It wasn't that they missed her. It was that they finally realized how much of their comfort came from someone they never once thanked. Andrew returned to the motel a second time. This time there was no soft knock, 3 hard raps, urgency wrapped in entitlement. Alina stood behind the door, hand steady on the knob, then slowly opened it. He looked different, thinner. Eyes sunken, hair messy, the shine of self-assurance dulled. "Mom," he began, "can I come in?" She didn't move. I know things got a little tense. Melissa's stressed, I'm stressed, we all are. I shouldn't have let it get this far." His apology was a performance rehearsed too late. "You're taking this too personally," he added. Eleanor let the silence stretch before she answered. You stood by while Melissa treated me like the help. And you let her. He blinked, no denial, just discomfort. I didn't know it hurt you that much. You didn't know, she repeated, because you never asked. The truth landed harder than any accusation. He looked down at the floor, swallowed. We're going to lose the house, Mom. We can't refinance without your signature. She almost laughed, almost, but there was no humor in the tragedy of finally being seen only when needed. You stopped seeing me a long time ago, she said. Now I've stopped letting you. He stood still, lips pressed, waiting for her to soften, waiting for the old Eleanor, the one who always forgave. But she had retired that version of herself. I gave you everything, she said gently, and you gave me scraps. He said nothing. I'm not doing this to punish you, she added. I'm doing it because I won't keep pretending I don't matter. And then, without anger or drama, she closed the door. Again, a week later, Eleanor's lawyer confirmed the sale was nearly finalized. Melissa's Instagram stories had stopped. The perfect selfies, the brunch quotes, the sunny updates gone. Eleanor heard whispers through town. The car lease repossessed. The coaching clients vanished. The friends distant, and Andrew applying for jobs he once felt too good for, looking for lifelines that had always been invisible because someone else made sure he never had to swim. They weren't just losing a house, they were losing the illusion. It had always been Eleanor. The quiet meals, the paid bills, the filled pantry, the warm laundry, the love that looked like labor and was mistaken for obligation. And now that love had boundaries. A third visit, Andrew again, no Melissa this time. He knocked, this time gentler, not out of strategy but surrender. Eleanor opened the door. He stood there like a boy again. Fragile, finally unsure. I'm not here to ask for anything, he said. I know I don't deserve to. She stayed silent. I don't know how I let it get this bad. You didn't let it, Eleanor replied. You chose it, every time you stayed quiet. Every time you looked away. He nodded slow. She left, he said. Melissa packed her bags last week, moved back with her parents. Eleanor didn't react. She said I was useless, that she was done. Still, she didn't react. He sat down in the motel chair like a man who had finally stopped performing. I thought I was protecting her, but really I was hiding behind her, letting her do the hurting so I didn't have to face myself. She looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in years saw not just her son, but a man standing at the edge of his consequences. I'm sorry, Mom, he whispered. She nodded. I believe you. He let out a breath. But that doesn't undo what's been done, she added. I don't hate you, Andrew, but I love myself more than I love the idea of who we were supposed to be. His shoulders dropped. Can I be part of your life at all? Eleanor didn't answer immediately. If there's going to be a place for you, she finally said, you'll have to earn it. It won't be given by default. He nodded. I hope you do, she added. He stood, walked to the door, paused. Take care of yourself, Andrew. He left, not a happy ending, but a real one. 2 weeks later, the house was sold. No dramatic calls, no legal battles. Just a quiet transaction, papers signed, ownership transferred. The house Eleanor once built, cleaned, and kept alive had been emptied of its illusions and of its occupants. She didn't go back to see them pack. She didn't want to walk through rooms that once held her sacrifices. She didn't need closure through objects. Her closure came from choosing herself. Eleanor moved into a small apartment across town. It wasn't grand. Just 2 rooms and a narrow balcony that caught the morning sun. But it was hers. Every chair, every dish, every blanket had been picked by her for her. The first thing she bought was a small round table just big enough for two. Not for guests, not for family dinners she'd never be invited to, but for moments of peace, her coffee, her notebook, her breath. She began writing again, not about Andrew, not about Melissa, not even about the house. She wrote about Elena, about the girl who grew up believing love was service, about the mother who gave and gave until she forgot the shape of her own name, about the woman who stood up not in anger but in awareness. Each line carved a path out of invisibility. Each page stitched her story back together not as someone else's background character, but as her own protagonist. The phone remained silent for a long time. And that silence didn't ache the way it once had. It cleared the air. It freed her from the cycle of waiting to be noticed. She wasn't waiting anymore. Andrew didn't call. Melissa never came back, and still Elena stood whole. She began to see herself not as the woman who walked away, but as the woman who finally stopped betraying herself. She ran errands without rushing home. She read books she never had time for. She planted herbs on her balcony. For the first time, her life fit in her hands, and it was light. She received news in passing that Andrew had moved into a small apartment in the city. No more curated life, no more filtered smiles. He was working quietly. Melissa had vanished from social media. Their once perfectly staged life was now just another offline story fading from public memory. But Elena didn't watch from bitterness. She watched from freedom. She knew she wasn't the villain. She wasn't the victim. She had been the vessel for years, and now she was the author. Sometimes when she passed the market, someone would stop her. "Hey, aren't you Andrew's mom?" And she would smile gently, "Yes. But mostly I'm Elena." She didn't disown her past. She didn't erase the years. But she rewrote the meaning. Her motherhood was never the mistake. Her silence was. Her delay in remembering that love without respect is not kindness, it's captivity. She now lived by a rule she never knew she needed. If they don't see you, stop standing in front of them. Build your own table. Set one plate, serve yourself first. The world wouldn't crumble. And if it did, at least it wouldn't crumble on your back. One afternoon, while watering her plants, her phone buzzed. A message from Andrew. "Hi, Mom. Just wanted you to know I've been thinking of you. Hope you're doing okay. I understand if you don't want to talk, but if you ever do, I'm here." She read it twice, then put the phone down. She didn't need to reply, not right away, because healing doesn't happen on someone else's timeline. It happens in your own rhythm, in your own room, with your own hands. Later that evening, she poured a glass of wine, lit a small candle, and sat at her little table. She looked out over the balcony, the sky fading to dusk. There were no grand conclusions, no fireworks. Just one quiet, powerful truth settling into her chest. She was no longer surviving. She was choosing, and that was enough. The end.